I knew that it can handle the load of having a 3D game, because I knew from the beginning that I want to make a 3D game. And Godot, it was available on Linux, which is my primary operating system, and Unity has, I think, an unofficial version for Linux, or not, discontinued.
I think they once had a version, then they discontinued, and then they reinitiated the program again. So I never got interested in like releasing any game in Linux. So, but I kind of remember there was a period of like supporting it and not, and then.
I think back when I checked it, there was an official version for Windows, Mac, and a forum where you could kind of get an unofficial build for Linux. And I've seen that this build has several gigabytes compared to Godot, which had at that time 50 megabytes, I believe. And Godot is available on Linux. It was open source, which is for me a huge plus because I love open source software.
Yeah.
But it doesn't mean that it's going to be good for games. Good enough for games, because I try to check if there are any 3D games made with Godot, and there weren't that many. Mostly it was like 2D platformers or indie jam games or stuff like that. So yeah, I just downloaded the binary. I checked if I made a simple test, imported some models, checked if I can move the camera 3D, and yeah, it worked. So I decided that I will give Godot a try, and I definitely don't regret that. Godot is an amazing software, and it was a good choice.
I pretty much transitioned from Unity to Godot. Not that I released anything in Unity, but the game I was trying to make had a lot of UI elements, and one of the things that I love about Godot, the UI library, is so cool that you could customize the whole like scene in a scene logic that you could actually use inheritance. That worked out for me. So, would you like to talk about the game you released on Steam, Intrepid, I believe?
Yes. So Intrepid was the first and only by far game released on Steam. The other being just a 2-minute adventure, which is a demo of Godot. And I remember that after, as I said, I wanted to make games for a very, very long time, but never got to it seriously. And I decided at some point to do it properly, and do it properly, I mean actually release a game. But I knew that I'm just a single person, and I knew that making games is a very complex process, so I had to check what I can achieve, and also kind of what I want the game to be. Yeah. For example, I don't want to make a 2-dimensional game. Those are cool, but I prefer 3-dimensional games. I realize that games that I kind of still play are either adventure games or puzzle games. So one of the two. But again, to make a puzzle game, I didn't have a clear idea about the main element of the logic that later gets expanded with every level. So like in Portal, you have portals that you can walk through. In other games, you can like absorb elements of the surrounding and then put them somewhere else. Yeah. I didn't have that clear element, and I knew I could figure it out, but that will take time. That will not be releasing a game. That will be designing a game. So I needed something that can be done faster. And I figured out that I could turn a script I had for an escape room into a computer game. That escape room was designed for my girlfriend's birthday. We turned our guest room into an actual escape room because we both like games.
Interesting.
We got some old masks to provide air to patients in the hospital.
Oh, okay.
It was like these are your cryo chambers, cryopods that you had these on your faces.
Yeah.
I had a small computer that kind of like Raspberry Pi, but I think it's a cheap computer. Yeah. I wrote a simple Python program that would be a security system, and then I connected to a monitor. So that was that game. And my girlfriend and I, we figured out a script for this whole thing, and we let our friends in. They would come out. The day they had like 25 minutes to come out. No one did. It was too complicated.
Too difficult, yeah. They usually are those escapes.
One team was very, very close. We just gave them one hint later when the time was up, and they just completed it in a couple of seconds, so that was very good. So I realized this script would be a perfect first game, but of course I cannot put like a desk, a couch, a window in a computer game, so I had to translate that into an actual spaceship.
Yeah.
Looking for models, one of them really fit the situation I wanted.
Interesting.
One of them had the style that I wanted to have, so we kind of started putting pieces together. I tried to translate these riddles that made sense in a room into riddles that would make sense, puzzles that would make sense in an actual spaceship, and piece by piece the game was made, and it was eventually released. Although, in hindsight, I know that I didn't make it clear enough that it was an escape room game. People actually expected an adventure game, and there was a lot of unclear. Like in an escape room, you usually have unclear puzzles. Like there is a symbol on the wall, and you have to figure out, oh, that symbol means something, and it wouldn't make sense. Adventure game, an adventure game, you don't expect something like that. And I didn't make it very clear that these are kind of abstract puzzles. I tried to turn them into puzzles that made sense.
So this was a couple of years ago you released it?
Yeah, I believe in 2018, I think.
18. So then was it with Godot 2 or?
No, that was already Godot 3. I remember like when I decided to get serious about games, and when I had this decision about Unity and Godot, I remember that at some point, at that point, I already had one previous experience, very short experience with Godot when I was checking other, I think, non-Python game tools and Godot, and that previous experience was Godot 2, and I was not impressed back then. I remember the tutorial was, I believe, build a Pong game or something like that, and at some point the tutorial told me to basically detect collisions manually, so like check if this
the objects were colliding like in each other's space.
So, and I thought back then, like, this is definitely something I would expect the game engine to do for me. I want a collision area, another collision area, and I want to check if they collide or not. And back then I kind of discarded Godot as not being very impressive, but sometime later, when I had the decision, I had to decide between Unity and Godot, I checked Godot again, and this was already Godot 3. It had a polished tutorial and a couple of examples about how to do stuff in 3D. So that was much more impressive, that was much more polished. And so I started using Godot for Intrepid, and the 3D stuff was very good in that.
So this should be maybe clue for people who investigated Godot version 2, but then maybe haven't actually tried version 3, that things have improved, so they may actually be surprised and get started again.
By how fast Godot improves, like how often they have new releases, how quickly they fix bugs. And then as soon as they fix bugs, people report new ones, so the number is still high. But but a lot of people are using that engine, so that's great. And because it's open source, it can grow in such a fast pace. Was it like a third of the first fastest growing project on GitHub recently?
I think so, or those timelines change. I think so. I can't remember the YouTube channel, but someone was making the comparison like year by year, some kind of like one of those graphics that things are sort of growing and then shrinking. It's like based on the number of searches in GitHub or Google, that kind of thing. But it always comes up in the top. It's like Unity, Unreal, Godot, and sometimes that order is a bit. It's interesting. So we already covered a bunch of things. I'm going through the list of questions I would like to ask, but I think this is a good segue. say after Intrepid, I believe you wanted to take some elements from that game and turn it into more like a product or framework you've been working on since the night. So the acronym is GOAT. So I think a lot of people might be interested in the inner workings of that project. So we should talk about that.
With pleasure. But let me just quickly tell about what happened in Miskatonic Studio after the release of Intrepid.
Sure.
First thing, I should not be surprised as a software developer, but I was surprised, I believe, after how much effort I had to put in Intrepid, that I still need to put an equal amount of effort to fix bugs that came out after the release, and fix some issues that were system specific. So like on Windows there was a problem with scaling the screen. On Mac OS I believe there was something else. I don't remember the details, and that took like a couple of months. After that I finally had some time to rest, and then I wanted to go back to the development. But initially I wanted to try something different, which was a board game framework. And I think I mentioned it very, very quickly during Godot Con 2019. That's the one in Poznan, not the one in Brussels. But that turned out to be super time consuming, so I decided to go back to first person games. And I wanted to have a game that is more obviously an escape room game, not a game that pretends to be an adventure game, but it's actually an escape room game. So I figured out a storyline for that, but I realized that I'm basically trying to first design a prison and then make the person escape that prison, but make it in an adventure-like way, so that this whole thing makes sense. So the prison would have to make sense, and then I had to find a way to go past all the security measures. So that was an extra effort that I put on myself, and I quickly realized that no, this is actually too much. And then I tried another idea for first-person games, but constantly there was something wrong with the script. So I wanted to make sure that it makes sense, that it's not too, after Intrepid where people complained that some puzzles didn't make sense, I wanted to make sure that now everything will make sense, nothing will be too not clear enough for players. So after that, after trying a couple of ideas, I realized that I do have a couple of reusable elements, like things that before, other than trying to come up with a script, I tried to come up with ways to interact with the surroundings. So pick up an item, see an item in an inventory, use an item on something else, use an item from an inventory on another item in an inventory, interact with an item in an inventory, so like have a box with a button, press the button inside of the inventory, stuff like that. I realized that there is a lot of reusable things, but not yet a good enough script, at least not in my opinion. So I decided to put those reusable elements together. But of course, I make a framework. So this is something that I really didn't want to make. I didn't want to do, make a framework, because I think that there are so many. I believe that a framework only makes sense if it's tested in a game. So it's very tempting, especially for software developers, to start working on a tool without having practical applications for that tool. And that's something that I wanted to avoid, but that's something that I eventually did. So I decided that I can at least create a small game and put it there as a part of that framework to prove like what this framework can do. So it's not just a bunch of elements in a void, but there's a room, a workshop with a computer and a generator and a floppy disk and a battery and so on, so we can pick them up, use them, and so on. And that's where Dalton 5000, I believe, made a model of a low poly model for one of his projects and agreed to let me use it. So I reused all the models from him basically, and that made the really nice look of this workshop. I think I had to add like just a door or stuff or a portal because they were not in the original design.
Yeah.
But most levels were from someone else. Interactions are super simple, but they show what we can do. So there's an interactive screen.
Yeah.
I can actually show that if you want.
Yeah, please go ahead. Actually, give more visual feedback to the.
Can you see the screen?
Yeah.
Okay, so let's. This is the.
It's launched.
You can see that there is a text at the bottom of the screen. I can hear in my headphones also the voice recorded by Amy, or all of those people who helped, whose work is included here. They are also credited on GitHub in the README.
Yeah.
So, for example, you can have like this floppy disk here. You can pick it up, you can rotate it, and you can
interact with the inner parts. Yeah.
Yeah. So there is a generator that when you can click it just once, so then it becomes inactive, but then it powers up the computer, then it powers up the portal. You can pick up a battery, and this one, and you can use a battery on it.
I see. So you can combine objects in.
Yes. Like not the version that you can see on that you can download from GitHub, because this was actually let me show you this. This is actually a bunch of experiments. So this was, for example, a Halloween experiment where I decided to play a spooky video on the screen. So this thing here is a flashlight. So if you just see this empty piece of paper here, but then you can turn off the light. And you can use an object just like not on another object, but on itself. So just use it, and then you can see UV light that shows you hidden this.
And then the mark on the
3D stuff like this.
Ah.
So yeah. So this is just a bunch of experiments at this time, because I'm constantly trying to do something new with code and eventually turn it into a game, but it's very time-consuming for one person to make a full game.
So basically, it's a system where you assign qualities or properties to certain objects. Say those objects have moving parts, like interactable parts, but then some can interact with other objects. So in a sense, you made it abstract enough that you can actually find the property.
I made it abstract in terms of that there are interactive objects. I mean, every destination or whatever stuff like that you need to make on your own. It's just that code handles things like there is an interactive object and you clicked on it. Yeah. So then a signal is sent, and I absolutely love signals in Godot. They are great. So all of the code is basically also based on signals. So you get a signal that an object with this name was activated, and you can then play an animation or sound or anything you want. Or if there's, you can also check some qualities about interactive objects, like make it an inventory interactive object that when you click on it, it disappears, and an inventory object appears in your inventory.
Yeah.
That's another part, inventory objects that you need to. I can share the screen again if you don't mind.
Yeah.
So it's like.
Because say there were some elements there in that room, like table, that the table is not interactable. It's a game object, but it's not an interactable.
So this is a mesh that I got from Dalton 5000. So here is an interactive screen.
Okay.
So that's interactive screen. No, that's not that.
Is it at the top?
Not exactly. I think it was program. Yeah. So this is a two-dimensional scene.
Yeah.
If I just show enough. Okay. Enough data. Blank screen. Yes. So
And it's actually maybe running the animation player. Yeah.
And all of the parts of the two-dimensional scene, and
Yeah.
this scene is later put here on the screen using an interactive screen, which basically takes a content size and then creates a viewport. There's a viewport here, and that viewport gets this two-dimensional node copied inside of it.
Yeah.
And
Infected.
wherever you point the camera on the screen gets turned into a mouse movement on this two-dimensional scene. So you can write this two-dimensional computer program, test it in 2D, however you want, and then you can just put it in 3D, and that's how it will be.
Yeah, that's actually a great example. Like, say, sort of like viewing a 2D scene inside a 3D scene through viewport.
Oh, I absolutely love viewports in Godot. Yeah, right after the last Godot Con, I believe, when I presented Code, someone I don't know the name, but someone mentioned it would be a nice idea to make a security camera in Godot. Like, I think I've shown this interactive. They said, "Oh, this could be useful very easily for a security camera."
Yeah, capturing the footage and then displaying it somewhere.
A 3D inventory item that was a remote with 4 screens, or like 1 screen and 4 buttons, and I created 4 cameras in this workshop. Now they are removed because this was like a short experiment, but in each corner of the room there was a camera, and you could just pick up this remote and you could see the room that you are sending in from 4 different corners of the room. And I see a lot of amazing things you can do with viewports. So for example, here now in inventory, in this inventory scene, the inventory item actually is also rendered in a viewport, because in a completely separate world, because that way you can be sure that the lighting from the place that your character is in will not influence the lighting in the inventory. So the objects are always visible in the inventory, but you get this cool feature where you can
because the world will have a new environment which is disabling the shadows and
exactly. So like the background here is not a static background. It's basically just a blurred out thing that your camera sees, and there is a viewport rendering content from inventory, which has absolutely no
impact,
nothing with your 3D world.
Cool.
So I use them whenever I can.
But yeah, this is very helpful for people who are wondering how to render game items without duplicating or creating a different version just for the sake of displaying it in inventory layout. Why not reuse the same element?
Actually, I added a feature to Godot, which can you see the? Oh, sorry, I no longer share my screen. Can you see these boxes, like these elements here?
Yeah, the circles.
They normally hold. Initially, you had to create an inventory icon for each. But now I added a feature that you can create it automatically. I can also turn the rotation, I believe, on or off. Just 1 minute, please. So yeah, there is a flag that you can rotate inventory items, and if you turn that on, you can see that. Can you see the?
Yeah, it's actually rotating in the circle there.
The same model as here, but like duplicated, put in a very separate world, and the viewport texture is used here for this button.
Yeah, cool.
And it goes for every other item that I would like to have. So it's done automatically by Godot's viewport, and I absolutely love that feature.
Yeah, interesting. Really interesting. So are you going to use this project on your next game? game, or is it something that you will put more features on and then maybe market it as a separate product? So what are your future plans?
Question. And as I mentioned earlier, I don't believe that a framework makes sense without an actual use of that framework. So if this is a framework for adventure games or any games with interaction with environment, then I would love to have an actual game using Godot. Right now, the only game that uses Godot is 2 Minute Adventure that is in the repository itself. So I am aiming toward that, but I constantly need to revisit my limitations as a single developer and what I can actually achieve and how much time I have to do that, considering my other responsibilities, not work, but other things too. So what I'm trying to do right now is I try to constantly experiment with stuff in Go, like this. If you could see the way that items are selected right now, there is a nice outline around them.
Yes.
That used, instead of that, Godot used to use icons, but I figured out, I found someone else's shader for outlines in 3D, and I decided to use it here. Unfortunately, there is no repository that I could point to, but I can find the person who uploaded this to one of the forums. So yeah, this UV light, this is also another experiment that you could make a lamp that works in a different layer and a texture that works in a different layer, and that lamp illuminates everything, but the texture is only visible when it's illuminated by that specific lamp, not by a normal lamp. So that kind of stuff I can see being useful for adventure games, or like more abstract adventure games where you know that you have to solve puzzles, not just
find something.
You have puzzles that someone prepared for you and we need to solve them. And I try to post regular updates about what's going on Twitter, and as much as I can also on GitHub whenever I'm sure that the feature is ready and not experimental. And that's what I'm doing to just not let this project die, but also I'm planning to use this Godot template for an actual game. It's just I haven't figured out what game would make sense that I could build it my own.
Are you accepting any offers from other designers or developers? If they approach you, they actually have a script for their game, they actually use your system in their game?
No one, I think, has yet inquired about if they could use Godot for their own game. I believe some people created issues on GitHub when trying to experiment. Although, so one person on Twitter, I remember they were working on like shooter game, but they needed interaction for walls like that. So they posted a couple of videos where Godot was used, and you could hear this opening messages, opening line that finally I will soon open the portal. So they didn't review it, so that is kind of cool. They also added a lot of their own stuff, so I hope that this game is still alive and will be released at some point. But they didn't ask that many questions about. I mean, you don't need to ask me for permission if you want to use Godot. Of course, it's open source on GitHub, so go ahead. But yeah, I haven't had any.
Yeah, well, hopefully, what we are doing here will actually help. Like, you'll get more support in developing the framework, as well as utilizing the framework. Other games too. Like that example is actually interesting. The person wasn't using it for a puzzle game or adventure escape the room game, was used for a different kind of purpose, but the core elements are common enough that it could be used in a different kind of game.
Yeah, basically, whenever you need to interact with surrounding, when you need to play voice in your show the subtitles and play the voice, pick up items and manipulate them, or stuff like that. Whenever you need to use that, Godot could be helpful. And yes, if anyone could if anyone would like to use that for an actual game, that would definitely help the framework, because I've realized I know how often things get overlooked when you just work on the framework, an actual project. Well, we wanted to release those reusable elements as an actual framework. So first, I started to extract them from the experimental projects that I've been working on, putting together in more or less consistent work. I realized how badly they work together in an actual game. I mean, how assumptions I made that were not true in an actual game. So, as soon as you put this to a test, as soon as you can actually a working thing with those elements, then you realize if they are good or not, and then the more projects you can use them for, the better the framework becomes. So that's what I hope.
It's always healthy when project gets more recognition and more use. That way, you make some parts better, focus on the parts that are actually more useful. So yeah, I'm looking at the questions here. I think we've already covered a lot of these. You were also showing me a different project. I think it was a chess board, which didn't look like maybe Goat related, but maybe it might be because there is still object interaction. So
yeah, I think Goat might be reused in a very limited way here, but some things like at least this outline shader definitely could be, or maybe just select object part. But yeah, I can also share the screen and show you that. So I believe it was this one.
Yeah, that's the one.
So the idea, as you can see, the shader is not yet here, but yeah, you can. This is the idea was to start working on something similar to Tabletop Simulator or Tabletopia, I believe, which is
I think so.
A board game service that works like Tabletop Simulator, but in a browser, so you don't have to install anything, which for me is a big plus, because if you want to play a game with friends and you start telling them, okay, first you need to install this, then you need to activate this module.
Yeah.
That kind of kills the joy, and many people put off with something like that. So I wanted to see if I can make a web application, a web game with Godot that connects to an underlying Python server and synchronizes the data. So I can just select a piece and I can move it, and you have a link, so you can do the same and you can move something on your side, I believe.
Yeah, I think when you were asking me if this was working, we were seeing each other's piece moves. Like that, I actually remember moving the castle, and I said I had just. So it's multiplayer, yeah.
Yes, the idea was so I like this project because I sometimes play role-play games with friends, and I think having a 3D miniatures, like let's say this shark, in a board would make this a bit
more appealing.
More appealing because we'll still be playing with miniatures despite having to play remotely because we are all in lockdown right now.
Yeah.
So that was why I started this thing, and I believe it could still be. It could be expanded, but the question is, do I have the time for this? Because so right now anyone can access this, I believe, and move the stuff around, but there's just one game. I would have to figure out.
Well, the viewers will already look at the URL you have there, so they have a chance to.
Yes.
So, we've all talked about like maybe the good sides of Godot. Is there anything that you experienced Godot that might have been done a lot better, that could have helped project timelines or during like the learning process too? It was good, but maybe it took a while, like a long time to learn and achieve that.
I think some, well, in general, I think everything was quite good in Godot, both in terms of performance and in terms of documentation. But occasionally there is stuff that is not yet documented. Like, I mean, one thing that I can think of right now is the twin node, which I believe I've been using it according to the specification, but then it turns out that like when I try to check if the twin node finished its job, it would show me that yes, but it actually didn't. Or whenever I try to start a new animation with a twin node, nothing would happen because first I need to click. First I need to call resume all or stuff like that.
So would it actually finish the last?
No. Yeah. When I started a scene, so I had this. I had like you use a twin node to move stuff from here to here, and then nothing would happen. Although I could see that the twin node got called because I had to start every time I added a new thing. I needed to call resume all, but also at the beginning I had to call start. I'm not sure if all that stuff is documented at this point. I'm trying to mostly like. I would expect this to work a bit differently than it did, and it took me a couple of experiments to figure out how to do it correctly.
I think that's now documented because I remember reading the start method.
I remember that some updates have been made to a twin node when I was porting from Godot 3 to Godot 3.0 to Godot 3.2, I believe. But when I was porting Intrepid, then some stuff had to be changed with twins, so it's possible that now it's documented much.
And now there's even a bigger effort. Like Nathan from GD Quest, it's a massive job, man. Really kudos to him, because writing documentation or fixing existing documentation is a very tough task.
Yes.
You have to be very clear. You have to decide like what to leave there, what to take out. It's always a moving target. Good luck to him, really.
When I know how difficult it is, when I realized how difficult it is when I was writing documentation for Godot, because I realized that a proper framework also needs a proper documentation if you want to use it, and making sure that I cover everything, every case, that also it's clear enough so the person who doesn't know me and hasn't used Go before knows what's going on. That's a really difficult task, and completely non-programming one. Like I can write the code that works and is clean.
It's an organizational problem. It's like, but it's like the moment you start writing documentation for your own product so that people can understand it, that moment you realize how difficult a task it must have been for the let's say in this case like Godot developers to write that document. It's like your project is only a subset of what is possible out there. Like you're using it, like the whole GD script to write your own thing, but the moment you write documentation for your own little project, it's a massive task.
Oh yeah.
But I think in a sense it's good practice too. It's like, well, what should go in your code, in your project? It's as if like kind of approach it from the other way around. Like if I was writing the documentation of a framework, what kind of things would I have to be implementing? Like the other way around, like why do you include some methods and why do you exclude some of them? Because that will also be in or out of the documentation.
Yeah, you might realize that this is like a bit too complicated to use. Maybe you should rewrite that part to make it easier for your podcast users.
Like I'm not saying anyone should start writing their framework thinking that they should first write the documentation, but maybe when you write the document, then you think of like refactoring your code, because it might be the last minute, but it's like, this documentation I'm writing for this method, well, this method is a bit funky, like maybe so there's some benefits writing document even for your own thing, like even if no one is going to use it, like having that kind of mindset might actually help.
Never know if someone's going to use it. If someone finds a project without a documentation, then it's quite possible they will decide not to use it.
Yeah. It might be you finding your code 5 years later, and then
exactly
all the other generic programming best practices and advice, like, because you are also doing Python. It's the same thing. It's not just Godot related. The discipline.
Yeah.
So, is there any other topic you would like to cover?
That in most cases, Godot documentation does an excellent job with.
Yeah.
I know that people who try to start with Godot really want. I mean, I've heard that very often that people expect video tutorials on YouTube about Godot. And I'm sure there are many people making tutorials about what you can do with Godot, but when you start with this engine, you can basically just check the tutorial they have in the documentation and then just work your way from there, one topic after another. And for me, that was definitely enough to start working with it and understand what are the concepts in Godot and how to use them for my game. So, as I said, using tutorials as an example, the documentation improved a lot over years. So that's really. This is an open source project. I would expect the documentation to be at a high level, and it is.
Yes.
Other than a couple of things, but they still work on that probably as we speak. The documentation is probably being updated. So that is.
Yes, I think that will actually help the community and maybe its growth as well. I mean, a year ago when I switched to Godot, that's one thing that I heard, like, was very common, that there wasn't enough documentation or community, which actually didn't really prove to be true. I always found good help, and sure, things could have been made better, and they are being made better, right? You can only get better right now. Good effort, really, on the team and the community actually helping it.
Yeah, the community of Godot is amazing. When I remember, when I went to Godot Con in 2019 in February, and I got to actually meet the people, the game developers who use Godot. It was a fantastic experience. The community is great. Maybe not as big as other game engines, but it's really the best quality of meat you can get, and the people are fantastic, and they share their ideas and talk and improve the engine, because anyone can improve because it's open source. So I absolutely love the community here. It's the best conference I ever went to. So
I have a friend. He's actually doing mainly C#. He actually looked at the project, the Godot GitHub page, and like basically saw the community support. He saw like some things, either the commit rate or the documentation quality, like just the overall look. He was impressed that he said even Microsoft hasn't implemented some of the features. What did he talk about? Like the WebGL stuff, exporting to HTML stuff, all the like WebAssembly and all that stuff. Some of those things are not even implemented yet. Let's say C# size. He was impressed by the community's support and new and cool stuff coming up. So that's healthy, really. Do you have any other topics you would like to talk about, or we could just wrap up?
I think we could wrap up unless you have other questions for me.
Yeah, I think we've covered a lot of grounds. I'll be sharing your project's link in the description area, so you'll get a good boost, I'm hoping. And
Thank you.
Maybe we'll have another talk later, like sometime later, when you maybe it'll be just covering Goat stuff, because today was just a mix of different topics. Maybe there will be some like Goat exclusive interview as well. We could do that, up to you.
I would love to. Hopefully by then I will have at least a draft of a game.
Yeah, and then maybe like this should be a good incentive for you to
Oh yeah, I need more incentive definitely.
Yeah, so and maybe more people will come in and then just join your project, and then it's all good. So I'm hoping it'll help.
Thank you.
Thank you. So thank you for your time. So we had Paweł from Miskatonic Games, and we'll most likely have him again in the. So thank you for your time, and talk to you
very
later.
much.
Bye.
Bye.
Hey, did you like it? Please check the description area down below the video to see our guest's other works. We'll be doing more of these talks, so don't forget to subscribe. Thank you.